Hello everyone. In this tutorial, what I'll be covering is how to select information from a database and use that information in our PHP code. In other words, I will be showing you how to display certain data within a database to a user or a visitor. So what I'm first going to do over here is I'm going to go ahead and save this file as, let's call it viewcontacts.php. So this file is basically going to be for viewing the different contacts we have in our table, contacts. So what I'm first going to do, as always, is show you the syntax. And up here, I'm just going to say syntax. And on another line, I'm going to say select. And then I'm going to type column names. Then I'm going to say from table name. And that's all we're going to have for the syntax. All right, so let's reevaluate here. First, we have this special word select. If it's in caps, it's something special. As you remember in the previous tutorial, we had insert. In this case, we want to select information from the database. So we first started off with select. And then here we say which columns or which fields do we want to select. So if we go back over to php-myadmin, in that case, it may be first name, last name, phone number, zip code, or it may be all of the column names that we want to select. So next we have the word from. From is just indicating what table do we want to select this information from. Going back to php-myadmin, we may have more than one table. In this case, we only have one table. It's a little simple, and our table is contacts. So again, we're selecting the columns that we want to actually access data from. And in our case, it's going to be all of them. And then we're specifying from what table. In our case, it's going to be contacts. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is, since we're actually accessing our database, we're going to go ahead and include our config.php file again. I'm just going to say connect to database. All right, so the next thing I want to do, going back to php-myadmin, in our case, I want to select all of this data. I want to get everything that we have in this database. So what I'm first going to do, going back to our text editor, I'm going to create a variable called result, and I'm going to assign to this variable a MySQL query. And I'm going to put some double quotes, say select. I'm going to put an asterisk. Then I'm going to say from, and I'll explain what the asterisk is here in a second. Then I'm going to say from our table contacts. That's the only one we have. Then on the next line, I'm going to go ahead and say or die. Then I'm going to put the MySQL error function. All right, so let's reevaluate here, starting with the select. Again, here I'm saying I want to select some information from the database, and then I have this star or this asterisk. And here I'm just saying I want to select all of the columns within our database from the table contacts. So again, all that's saying here is, instead of having to type out first name, last name, phone number, and zip code, I can simply put that asterisk, and that means I want to select data from first name, last name, phone number, and zip code. In other words, all of my columns that I may have here. So the next thing that we want to do is actually do something with this information we just pulled from our database, right? So in order to do that, I'm going to create a while loop. So I'm going to start a while. I'm going to say row. I'm going to create a variable called row. And then I'm going to use a special function, which I'll explain here in a second, called MySQL fetch array. And within array, I'm going to insert our variable result. So let's first, before we put anything in our while loop, let's first go over what all this new stuff means. So starting with this MySQL fetch array function, what this allows us to do is get the next row of data that we have selected within our contacts table. Basically here, where we have this MySQL query and we're selecting the column names from the contacts table, we're storing that data or that information from our database as an associative array in this variable result. So that's why we're using this special function MySQL fetch array, as we're pulling that array information from this variable result. Now I know that can be confusing, so what I'm going to do here is let's go over to php-myadmin. So by using that MySQL fetch array within a while loop, it's automatically starting at the first row within our database. And then after it loops again within the while loop, we're going to go to the second row. After it loops again, it's going to go to the third row. It's going to continue this cycle until it gets to the last row within our database. And it's going to automatically, if we come back over to the text editor, it's going to automatically make this condition evaluate to false. And we're basically going to continue to execute any other code that we may have in this file. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is write some more code. We're going to say echo row first name. Then we're going to say echo row last name. Then echo row phone number. The echo row zip code. Then at the end, I'm going to put a line break. And you'll see why here in a second. All right, so let's reevaluate this. Starting back up here at the first line within our while loop, the first time we actually loop through our while loop, we're going to be here, right? So if we go back to php-admin, we're basically saying, again, remember that the MySQL fetch array looks at the first row. So when we say row first name, we're saying, well, what's in the first row within the column first name? And we land here at Robert. So if we go back to our text editor, we're basically replacing this with Robert within this first cycle of the while loop, right? So once we actually replace that, we're going to the next line, which is row last name. So again, we're still in the first loop within the while loop, or the first cycle within this while loop. So we're still in this first row. So we're evaluating this and we're saying, well, what's in the first row within the column last name? And we land here, Smith. So again, we're just really replacing this with Smith. So we continue to do this all the way until we get to this line break. So after we make a line break, we're going to repeat this cycle. But when we repeat this cycle, we're going to the next row automatically. Again, that's what that MySQL fetch array is doing for us automatically. So again, we're going to be like, well, what's in the second row within the first column, or the column first name? And we have Sally. So the next cycle, we're going to be replacing this with Sally. And we're just going to continue to output this information until we get all the way to the last row. Once we get to this last row, we're going to come back up here. If we go back to the text editor, we're going to come back up here. And when this here is going to evaluate, or this here is going to evaluate to false. So that's when we're going to actually break out of this while loop automatically. And we're going to continue to execute any code that we may have. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and save this and actually show you what's actually going to be displayed in our browser. So if I hit save and I come over here and we type in localhost, this is in the PHP Basics phone book, and we name this view contacts.php. So as you can see, it's not formatted that well, but it did pull all of our information out of our database, or it displayed the information that we had echoed out from the database. So if we go back to our database, as you can see, it's laying out that information in the same order that we have here. Again, it's starting at row 1 and just continuing on until it gets to that final row and then ends that while loop. So now I'm going to give you an example on how you can actually get a little bit more creative with how we're outputting this information, or how to format it in a different way. Maybe you want it in a table, maybe you want it different colors for the first name. It's really up to you at this point. Or maybe you want to actually just store it in a variable and use it elsewhere in the program and not even display anything. It's up to you what you want to do at this point. I'm just really giving you a basic example, but let's make this a little bit more easier to read. So what I can do here within this echo, I'm going to say name. Let's make that a capital N, name, then a colon. Then I'm going to actually display the first name. And I'm also going to go ahead and display the first name and the last name on the same line. And then I'm going to put a line break. Then on the second row, I'm going to say phone number. Put a colon, put a space. Then I'm going to put a line break at the end. Then for zip code, again, I'm going to write zip code. And I don't have to put a line break for that. And I want to separate my contacts with 2 line breaks. And let's see how this looks. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Come back over to my browser, hit refresh. And as you can see, it looks a little bit easier. I can see that my first contact is this guy named Robert Smith. I can see his phone number, his zip code. Then I can see my next contact and so forth. So again, it's up to you how you want to format it once you actually retrieve that information from the database. Here, I'm just giving you a really straightforward, simple example. All right, so the next thing I want to show you is, let's say if we go back up here to where we're actually selecting the different column names we want to access data from. Let's say we only want to access information from first name and the last name column. All right, and we have to make sure we're typing this correctly using the same capitalization and lowercase letters. So let's say I only want to access first name and last name, and I hit save. And then over here in my browser, I hit refresh. As we can see, the only thing that is displaying here is the last name, or the first name and the last name. It's not displaying phone number and zip code. Even though I go back over here to my text editor, I still have row phone number and row zip code. So why is it not displaying that? Well, when I go back up here to the select, I see that I did not select that I want to actually access the phone number and the zip code. So in other words, I could basically delete these 2 lines of code, even though it's not displaying anything. But at this point, I'm not actually accessing those columns. So there's really no point of having that information there. So if I go back to my browser, hit refresh, I'm only displaying the first name and the last name. And what I could also do, it's perfectly legal for you to say, I want to access first name, last name, phone number, and zip code. All right. Let me just stretch out my text editor a little bit more here. It's perfectly legal for you to type out all of your column names or fields here if you want to. And again, if I hit save, go back to my browser, hit refresh, it's going to display all that information because I said I want to select data from all those columns, which are listed in our database. But it doesn't make any sense when you have a special feature, which is the asterisk, basically saying I want to select all those columns. So you're basically just saving space. But again, it's up to you, but it makes more sense if you want to access all of your columns or all of your fields within your table, you might as well use the asterisk. So the next thing what I'm going to do is hit save, and let's go back to our actual viewcontacts.php file. Let's try to make this a little easier with adding contacts and actually viewing our contacts. So in other words, what I mean is, let's put some links up here that says, maybe one that says add contacts, which will go back to our form where we added contacts to the database. And then we're going to have another link over here that actually brings us to this page so we can view the contacts within our database without having to log into phpModMin. So if you're really trying to make an online phone book, you will want to make it where you didn't have to actually log into phpModMin to actually see your contacts. So what we're going to do here is, let's say after we include our config information, or we can put it up here, really doesn't matter. Let's include a file, which we'll create here in a second, called header.php. And we're just going to say include header links. And we also need to go to our contact form, and we want to actually now include some PHP. So we have to do 2 things here. We want to create our PHP scripting block here. And I'm also going to have to save this. Instead of an HTML file, I need to make it a PHP file, again, because it contains PHP code. So let's clean that up a little bit, and let's save that again. So now I need to create this header file, right? That's going to be appearing above both of these files. So I'm going to make a new file here, and I'm just going to go ahead and write some HTML code. And for the first link, let's make it link to our actual contact form where we're actually adding contacts. And we're just going to say add contact. And we're going to have another link that says, let's view our contacts, right? We're just going to say view contacts. All right, and let's save this file. Again, it's going to be called our header.php. Then I'm just going to hit save. All right, so before I forget, let's also go ahead and put some line breaks in here. And let's also go ahead and save that. And something else I almost forgot, we need to also include this header within our add contact file. And you'll see here in a second. So include header.php. And let's say, what was it? Include header links, header. Yeah, I think header links. Hit save. So now let's go back to our browser and let's hit refresh. And as you can see, now our links actually appear up here in the header. So if I click on add contact, that takes us to our add contact form. So let's input a new contact, or let's first view our current contacts. So as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 contacts. So let's make up a new one. We're going to say Mike Kilgore. Let's say his phone number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. And for his zip code, we're going to say it's 60987. All right. So I'm going to hit submit. And as you can see, it says new contact added. And if you look at the file we're currently on, it's the add contact.php. So I wanted to have the ability to be able to go back to my add contact form or view my current contacts after I've added a contact. So let's go ahead and just view our contacts. And let's look for Mike Kilgore. And as you can see, Mike Kilgore is located here. And just in case you're wondering, you do have the ability to actually sort your information in a certain order. Maybe you want this listed in order by the first name or by the last name. So you do have that ability. I won't get into it in this tutorial, but you do have that option if you wish to do that. So that does conclude this tutorial. So hopefully now you have a new or better understanding of how to select information from a database and use that information in your PHP code. So be sure to take the online quiz at thephpbasics.com, and I will see you in the next video.